Hey everybody, welcome back. If you're new, thanks for stopping by. I know it's been a while since I've had a tech video or gaming video, but there is good reason behind it. I've been working on my house, and one of the things I am doing is upgrading all the doors. Well, the interior doors at least. Don't worry, I'll have more tech and gaming related videos coming soon, but today I'm going to try out this Bora Portamate saw guide to trim my doors to fit the door frames. First, I was looking into a table saw or a planer, but those are quite expensive, and I already have a circular saw. So I searched around on the internet till I came across this saw guide. First, as you can see, it barely fits on my workbench, as this is about 65 inches long with the clamping handle. In fact, I needed to adjust my camera here and zoom out a bit just to get it in the frame a little bit better. I know it's not totally in the frame, but I just wanted to show you how big it was, and so you can see it a little better when I'm doing the next steps here. As I flip it over here, you can see the clamping mechanisms here. The one end of the clamp is fixed to the guide. However, the other end easily slides up and down the rails to adjust it to fit the object that needs to be cut. To lock it down, all you need to do is push it with the gray plastic portion towards the object being clamped. Once you do that, it locks into place. Then you just pull the handle down on the fixed side. This will fix it to the object and won't move, so you can get that nice straight cut. To unlock it, all you need to do is pull the gray plastic piece on the smaller side away from it, and it should be able to slide again freely. Now, this has two sections to it, which can be connected together with the four screws here, and goes up to 105 inches total. Obviously, 55 inches on the one section would not be enough to go the entire length of the door, but once you have them attached together and the screws tight, it should not wobble or twist, and the clamp will be able to slide all the way across the entire guide with no issues. One thing I do want to mention is you probably can't cut something that's 105 inches long, since that clamp will take up a few inches at the end there. But let's hop outside and get started on trimming the width of the doors. The other tools you're going to need besides the saw guide are a T-square, something to make marks with like a mechanical pencil, safety glasses to protect your eyes, and of course your circular saw. I recommend a circular saw that is larger than 6.5 inches, and I'll show you why here shortly. Now, before you start measuring where you want to place the saw guide, you're going to need to figure out how wide your saw blade is and how far it is from the edge of the base plate you'll be guiding along the saw guide. With the T-square, you can do that quite easily. You can see here once I flip it around that mine is about 1/8 of an inch wide, so I'm going to factor that in when I measure the doors and how much I need to trim off them, which is about 1/8 of an inch on each side. Now, I could go the other way around and have the shorter side of the saw guide working for me, but I find it much easier when I'm sawing something that I use the larger portion of the base to hold against the saw guide and have that on the surface I'm cutting rather than hanging off the edge. Now that we have that figured out, I'm going to grab my T-square again and mark out 4 places along the door that are 4 1/8 inch away from the edge, so I can place my saw guide straight along the door. Once I have those measured out, I'm going to go ahead and grab my clamps and clamp the door to my sawhorses. That way it doesn't move around when I'm sawing, because this is going to be a very skinny trim, and you'll see here in just a few moments once we get started. Once those are secured, I'm going to go ahead and move my clamps down the rail here on the saw guide, get them set into position, then flip it over and attach it to the door. Now, firstly, I was going to use it where the movable clamp end was on the end of where I was sawing. However, I decided it was much better to do it the other way around. That way I had some lead up of the guide when I was moving into the door, rather than trying to get the saw placed correctly the other way around. And I'll flip it over here in just a second. Before clamping it down, I am just making sure it is aligned with all my marks. That way, again, we get a straight cut. So once I have it aligned and then have double and triple check these, I can go ahead and lower the handle to make it fasten to the door, and that way it doesn't move around. And if you notice here, when I place my saw on the end, it's not completely flat and I can rock it back and forth. However, as long as I keep the front end flat, it will be a straight cut. But if I rock it any other way, it won't be a straight cut and you'll be cutting at an angle. And the reason being is the motor housing on the saw is a little short for the saw base plate to sit completely flat. So I have to make sure that the front edge is flat while guiding it along the rail. So let me do my first trim here. The saw guide worked great for that first trim and did not flex, bend, or move while I was trimming the door. I did go over the end of the door again just to make sure it was trimmed straight, as once I got to the end, the base plate on the saw was no longer making contact with the door and kinda had to hover. That's because I was using that 6.5-inch saw, and the housing on the motor kinda is a little bit lower than the guide itself. But I made do, and it seemed to trim accurately. Afterwards, I did just go over and double check all my measurements, just to make sure they came out accurately and my trim was straight. Now that I know it works, I'm going to flip over the door and trim the other side. I could have just trimmed one side, doubled the width of what I was doing instead, but I chose to go this route as I want the doors to look correct once I install them in the house. Now I can just repeat the process for the other side of the door, clamp the door to the sawhorses, measure the door in those 4 places, then place my saw guide and trim the door. I did end up having to repeat this process for 11 more doors, but it only took a couple of hours to get all of them trimmed to fit the door frames they're being installed to. This saw guide was a great investment, as not only can I trim doors with it, but other pieces of wood without having to spend a lot of money on a table saw or a planer to get the cut I want. It was about $75 at Lowe's, so overall I saved around $200 to $300, possibly even more, over a table saw or a planer. Also, with 2 cars in the garage and it not being very large, I don't have much room to store more large tools like a table saw, and it could just be hung off one of my cabinet doors. Personally, this worked great for me, and I'm planning to use it in the future to update my simulation rig, as there are a few changes I'd like to make, since there are a couple things with the new seat that I currently don't like, and really need to correct. Overall, I have to say this was a great purchase and was a massive help so I could get a straight cut on all the doors. If you're looking to not spend hundreds of dollars to make some straight cuts for a project, even if they aren't doors, this might be the route to go if you already have a circular saw. Personally, when I was previously trying to make straight cuts with my circular saw without a guide, it looked more like an S-curve on a racetrack, and I definitely don't need curved doors for my house's rectangular door frames. Well, that is all for this video today, but I will have a few more door related videos coming soon. I know it's not tech, but I have more plans coming for those as well, so stay tuned. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down below. Also, if you can hit that like and subscribe button, I'd greatly appreciate it as it helps me out. I thank you all for stopping by today. Hope you have a great rest of your day, and take care.